The crowd cheered, the mic caught his last words, then a single crack split the air. In seconds, fear swept across the stage. A man who thrived on debate lay wounded before his audience. One question still cuts deeper than the bullet: who wanted him silenced, and why? Before we dive in, tap like so more people can see this breakdown, and hit subscribe to Story Vault to stay ahead of the story. Welcome to Story Vault. Tonight we'll walk through what happened at Utah Valley University, how the investigation is unfolding, and what it all means for public safety. Stay with me. By the end, you'll see this event through a lens most people haven't considered. On September 10th, during an outdoor event at Utah Valley University, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot while speaking to a crowd. He was taken to the hospital, but did not survive. Investigators say the shot came from a rooftop about 200 yards away. They later recovered a high-powered rifle nearby, and the FBI has now released images of a person of interest. As of this recording, the suspect has not been publicly identified or arrested. Kirk built his events on openness: no barrier, no distance, face-to-face debates. That openness made people feel welcome, but that same closeness also left him exposed. People came to challenge him, to cheer him, to question him, and that energy gave his rallies life. But the same openness that fueled the debates also created the space for an unseen threat to strike. The rally happened outdoors in daylight, surrounded by students. It felt safe, even ordinary. Therefore, few thought danger could strike from far beyond the tent. But safety often feels strongest right before it's broken, and when the shot rang out, reality collapsed. One shot. Not chaos, not crossfire, a single, deliberate round. That choice suggests preparation, but it also meant the attacker had time to escape, turning a public debate into a carefully planned crime scene. Witnesses described the silence after the shot as even more terrifying than the sound itself. People looked around in confusion, not knowing where the danger came from. Some thought it was fireworks. Others realized immediately and dove for the ground. Seconds stretched into minutes, and the crowd's sense of control disappeared. Let me pause and ask you this. If you were in that crowd, what would your very first instinct be? Run, hide, or help? Type your honest answer in the comments. Reading your thoughts brings this story closer to life. In the first minutes, panic rippled like a wave. People tripped over chairs. Voices shouted conflicting instructions. Some ran for exits while others froze in place. Security and campus police rushed forward, but in the confusion they struggled to locate the shooter. A few people were briefly detained, only to be released once it became clear they were innocent bystanders. Investigators later found the weapon stashed away in an alley. Therefore, they believe the shooter had studied not just the stage, but also the escape routes. That level of detail suggests planning that went far beyond impulse. Detectives are now piecing together camera footage from surrounding streets, traffic lights, and campus security systems. They are interviewing dozens of witnesses, checking for anyone who may have noticed unusual behavior in the days leading up to the rally. But information is fragile. Memories can blur under stress, and fear sometimes changes what people think they saw. Therefore, separating fact from panic will be one of the hardest parts of this case. Leaders quickly condemned the attack. The president called it an assassination. Supporters shared messages of sympathy, but when reactions race ahead of evidence, the investigation carries even greater weight. Officials must sort through rumor, speculation, and political noise to uncover hard facts. That process can take weeks, sometimes months, but every delay leaves communities on edge. Most will say this was only about politics. That's partly true, but here's the deeper lens. It's about the collision between public openness and tactical vulnerability. Kirk's events invited debate, but that very design gave someone a predictable target. Free speech thrives on open spaces, yet those same spaces can become traps. Investigators are expected to study three things closely: gaps in surveillance, how communication broke down in those first minutes, and the logistics of safety at open events. Fixing those flaws won't stop every threat, therefore every small change matters. Future rallies may see more barriers, more officers stationed near rooftops, more bag checks at entrances. But every added layer of protection raises another question. How do we preserve freedom of speech without wrapping it in so much caution that the openness disappears? Behind the headlines are the personal stories that rarely make front pages. A student who lost her shoe in the stampede and later realized she had sprained her ankle. A father who had brought his teenage son to hear the speech and spent hours afterward explaining why someone would try to silence a voice with violence. The first responders who carried strangers to ambulances while listening for any sign of a second shot. Each of them carries a memory that won't fade long after the cameras move on. Vigils soon followed on campus lawns. Candles flickered, posters were taped to brick walls, and students shared quiet prayers. Some held hands, others sat in silence. In those gatherings, grief met unity, but fear lingered underneath. Because while mourning is public, healing is private, and everyone who was there carries a scar no one else can see. Think about the last time you sat in a crowd and felt completely safe. A concert, a sports game, a church service. Now imagine that sense of safety vanishing in an instant. That ripple doesn't just change laws, it changes how we gather, how we trust, how we move in public spaces. Some people will hesitate before buying a ticket to their next event. Others will scan rooftops and exits without even realizing it. Fear becomes part of the air we breathe, invisible but heavy. This tragedy also highlights the delicate line universities walk. On one side, they are places of free thought and open exchange. On the other, they are now potential targets where security must be weighed against freedom. Campus leaders will now face tough questions from students and parents. Should events be moved indoors? Should security checks be mandatory? Should political speakers be restricted for safety? Each answer will shape not just policy, but the culture of public life. The shooter remains at large. Every day that passes without an arrest adds weight to the community's fear. Is the suspect still nearby or already far away? Was this the act of one person or part of something larger? Questions like these haunt both investigators and the public, but until evidence gives clear answers, uncertainty will remain the shadow over every detail. We started with cheers in a tent and ended with a question hanging over every public square. How do we protect open debate without making ourselves vulnerable? So I'll leave this with you. If you were in charge of planning tomorrow's campus events, what one change would you make to keep everyone safe? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be reading. If you want the full timeline and a deeper breakdown, check out my longer videos linked right here on Story Vault. They'll give you the bigger picture. Thank you for staying with me. I'll see you in the next one.